Good evening. It's another Wednesday night, and that means we're here on the Coalition Radio Network for another episode of Chaz Calenda, Attorney at Law. As we do every Wednesday night, we will be discussing various legal issues that affect us here in the state of Rhode Island and throughout the nation, and ones of particular interest to hear here on the Coalition Radio Network and those of our guests, particularly our guest here tonight, Rich Southwell, who is a lead plaintiff in the case of Southwell et al. Versus Governor Daniel McKee, the case that is taking on the mask mandates in the school system, the K through 12 school system, as it winds its way through the Superior Court. And we're here to give you some updates on where we stand on that case. So Rich, welcome back to Chaz Calenda, Attorney at Law. I'm glad to have you.
Good to be here. Nice to see you again.
You as well. And for those of you who have been following this, you all probably know that the Rich and fellow parents across the state have taken on the governor's executive orders, which are ostensibly due to expire in the next few days or so, that are required masking for our school children, K through 12 school children in all schools, public schools here in the state of Rhode Island. They had a lengthy preliminary injunction hearing to start it off after the complaint was filed. Although that wasn't successful, the case does go on. It's ostensibly supposed to be in the discovery phase at this point. However, from my understanding, my reading of the docket sheet, the state has now filed a motion for judgment on the pleadings, which essentially says in legalese, the state is asking the judge to look at the complaint that's filed by you, Rich, and your fellow plaintiffs, and the answer, which was filed by the governor and the attorney general, and make a decision and say there is absolutely no way under any conceivable set of facts that the plaintiffs could win their case. And we don't need discovery. You can decide that on your own, Judge. That's essentially the standard for deciding a motion for judgment on the pleadings. So with that in mind, I know there had been several previous orders from the court and in requests for extensions for the state to provide discovery, to request for discovery from your attorney, Gregory Picciarelli. And I know that instead of answering those discovery questions and discovery requests, they then henceforth filed this motion for judgment on the pleadings. And here we are, and that's coming up at the end of the month, I believe. So Rich, tell us from the perspective of the plaintiffs, what can we expect seeing going forward here?
Well, you caught me on a good night because I was just at a plaintiff's meeting with our attorney, Greg Picciarelli. So we were kind of, working through where we've been, where we're going, answering questions. There are multiple layers to the mask issue now, as you know. And so the case that we started way back in August, continues, and the state continues to do what the state does, which is try to, put this thing down at every turn. And yet, they haven't been able to do it yet. It started with, a little bit of judge shopping very early on in the name of, resource management and I forget, judicial economy. Is that the term? I'm not an attorney, but
that's
trying to consolidate things and make it convenient and cost effective for everyone.
Except you.
Yeah, except, yeah. But, so we've gone through this and, as you noted in your open, we've had multiple delays. The emergency order is going to expire and it's not going to be renewed. So, let's push the discovery out. Why they don't want to answer some pretty simple, basic questions, is beyond everyone. The General Assembly is now, asking some of those questions as well. They came up, during the debate on the floor a couple of weeks ago, saying that, they were going to have a couple more weeks to get all of this information together and explain what was going on and how we had this misunderstanding over 3 pediatric deaths from COVID in Rhode Island and, various other unanswered questions. So, they're going to answer sooner or later. They're going to have to answer this. But as far as our case is concerned, the discovery response is currently due March 14th. We have a hearing on the state's latest motion on March 26th. So the expectation is that the state will do what they always do, which is not miss an opportunity to push out the deadline, and will, expect them to request some sort of an extension until after the hearing to decide whether, the judgment on the pleadings,
Right.
and, see what happens from there.
So there's a lot to unpack in there, and
Yeah, there
as far
sure
as
is.
from a legal perspective, um, generally, obviously, it would have been great if you guys had won the preliminary injunction, but that's exactly what it says. It's preliminary. It's the information that was presented at the time, known at the time by the court, and taken into consideration. It's not a judgment on the merits, a final judgment on the merits. It was a request essentially by you, the plaintiffs, to say, let's stop what we're doing while this litigation plays out, because we have kids who are suffering irreparable harm as a result of these mandates. We believe that we are going to succeed ultimately once discovery has gone through the proper channels, and that the benefits for our side outweigh the benefits for the other side. The equities lie in our favor as the plaintiffs. The judge did find that the kids are suffering some degree of irreparable harm as a result of that hearing. He did not rule with you on the other two, so he did not grant the injunction, but by no means did that in the case. Especially now, considering what you were just talking about, the same questions now that have come to light in the floor of the General Assembly, where they're asking the questions that essentially you guys are asking: how did we get to this point? Why did we get to this point? How did it get so far down the rabbit hole that we all, jumped on this boat to issue these mandates and, and get to this litigation? The state's just basically saying, we don't need to answer those questions because it's all going to be behind us within a matter of weeks. So they've essentially asked this court on two major grounds that I could figure it out. That number one, it's going to be moot. That's a doctrine. That's a legal doctrine, the mootness doctrine. And number two, that there is no conceivable way that you could win as a matter of law. So I agree with you that the state, before the 14th, will file their motion to push out their having to answer your discovery requests, which I believe there were interrogatories, requests for production of documents, and things of that nature. I'm not sure if there were requests for admissions, but those are all civil litigation tools for discovery, which are completely legitimate. And I have no doubt that they're going to try to push this off because, as you know, maybe you've heard, Rich, this is an election season. And
This year is?
This year, amazing or not?
Interesting.
Amazing.
Okay.
Yeah, 2022 is an election season. It just so happens to be that all state officers are up for election or reelection. The whole General Assembly is up for election or reelection. And the political winds have been changing lately as far as the I don't know if you call it the popularity or the public's perception of these mandates and the COVID-19 mandates with masking, mandated vaccinations and the like. So it's my opinion. I think that you've hit it right on the nail right on the head, that the AG wants no part of this to go any further. The governor wants no part of this to go any further. So they don't want to hand this over. They just want the court to kind of say, go away. It's not really useful anymore. It's all over. We don't need to hear it.
Yeah. And thank you for bringing the election year to my attention.
Yeah,
I will mark my calendar accordingly. They're in a tricky spot right now. Something happened a couple of weeks ago when 400 parents showed up to voice their displeasure about masks. It got very real. And I've sent lots of emails to the General Assembly, the entire email list, and never gotten a response except for my local representatives. But when 400 people showed up, all in favor of removing masks, parents, angry parents with really heart-wrenching, damaging stories, And there's a judge's decision on the issue of irreparable harm being caused to children. That put the General Assembly into a box, right? So now they finally, because they were in session, had to do something, and they had to make a deal, because there were a lot of people that did not want to take that vote one way or the other about extending the governor's powers with school masking attached to it. And so now you've got the Attorney General's office, who they took the case. They didn't have to take that case, and I'd like to get your thoughts on that at some point in this conversation. But they took the case, so now you own it. You gotta defend it. That's just the way it is. And so I can understand that they have to do their job, and they have to do it to the best of their ability on behalf of their client, but it's not really helping that office in an election year, because what it looks like to parents is you're stalling, you're covering up, you're not being forthright. The governor, the same, not being forthright, trying to bury it. The Department of Health is an appointee. Dr. McDonald is an interim. Hopefully he remains an interim until he's not an interim anymore and he's gone and off doing something else. But they have this mess, and they have questions that they need to answer. If I were them, and I'm not, I would be trying to answer those questions as quickly and as forthrightly, and to the extent that errors or mistakes were made, copping to them and apologizing. But that's not what they're doing. And I think it's going to backfire spectacularly, in the same way that the extension of the powers with school masking through April blew up on them. I don't think they have a sense of what they're dealing with, and how deep this runs, and how many families are awake now as a result of what's happened through this school year.
Yeah, I think
So
they've got the idea now, and I think you're absolutely right with the turnout. That put a lot of people who probably thought that this was just going to fizzle out or burn out on notice.
or it was a small vocal group of angry parents, but it was a small group, right?
Right.
What did Trudeau call them?
A
A small
fringe
fringe minority.
minority,
Yeah.
yeah, that kind of
Nope.
thing.
And the other thing I would point out, and I have to give credit to, I get to be on camera a lot, and maybe not other people don't want to be, but there are a lot of parents involved in this. And so we've got the case that's been working its way through Superior Court, but we also have parents mobilized very effectively at every school committee. And as you can see, as the decisions are being made about what to do on Monday, they're all going our way. They're all going green.
Mhm.
So this idea that it's a fringe minority, or Bob Walsh from the NEA or NERI is going to tell you that there are a lot of parents that are really on board with masking and they don't want masks to go away. Those parents haven't shown up in any of these meetings.
Where
And
are
that's why
they?
the decisions are going the way that they're going.
Right. Yeah, if this critical mass of parents were really on board with keeping these masks in place, you would think that in an issue as such as highly charged issue such as this, you would see at least an equal outpouring from that side that we saw from the side of your parents that come on there over that were very aggressive and vocal about their positions. I haven't seen it. I mean, maybe you're closer to the issue than I am, but I have not seen it, other than a perhaps not as vocal, but just as fringe of a minority, to quote Justin Trudeau again, of people who want to push for masking forever until we've eliminated COVID to its very core.
Yeah, I haven't heard it among the parents, and I've been in, on Zoom calls on a couple of school committee meetings where there's resistance to taking the masks off the kids. It's one or two school committee members who feel as though they need to protect parents and families from themselves.
Mhm.
And we have to keep managing to zero COVID,
Right.
which is just not achievable, as we know.
Ever.
I listened in on the Little Compton call last week, and there's a group on that school committee that just desperately need some kind of a metric that will tell them when to put the mask back on. They need a bright line when it's this many cases per 100,000. But then do we do it at the Little Compton town level? Do we do it at the state level? Do we do it at the county level? What's the right number? And they're just apoplectic at the idea that there would be no mechanism for them to put the mask back on the kids immediately if they needed to, or if they felt like they needed to.
Well,
And
and that,
those are the people that need that. Those are the dead enders. Those are the ones that are going to be here until the bitter end. And
right.
those are the ones that need to be replaced, come November.
100%. And that kind of goes back to the issue that you brought up earlier, is that, these are the individuals who want complete control. And this has got to be done at the state, at the local level to start, because these are the school committees who are making the communities, the community policies, the school policies. I mean, they're the ones who are kind of holding on to all of this, kind of figuring that, we've got this power. Where is it going? What do we do? Again, but they're looking at it from the metrics point of view. When can we put it back on? And this kind of undercuts the whole argument that the state's making, is that, that we're removing these restrictions, so there's no further reason to hear it. And this is completely undercuts that, because they're looking for a reason to bring it back. When do we bring it back? So this is exactly falls into that mootness doctrine, the exceptions to the mootness doctrine, where it says this is an issue that is capable of repetition, yet evading judicial review because of the short time frames involved. It is 100% undercuts what the state, half the state's argument right there.
Yeah, the other interesting thing so there's, it's moot. And my response to that is until it's not, right? Until the next thing happens and there's a new variant, right? So we have to get to the bottom of this, because this can never, ever, ever be allowed to happen again. But there's another piece in this, and that's that the Department of Health is still putting out guidance and recommendations. So it's almost like they're continuing to insert themselves into this process, and they're kind of wedging themselves between the school committees and the parents. So, if you're on the school committee, you're like, well, I got a bunch of really upset parents in the room here or on Zoom or however we're doing our meeting. And then I've got this guidance from the so-called medical experts at the Department of Health telling me that I should be strongly recommending masks, and maybe I should be taking it farther than that. So they haven't exactly, while they're no longer mandating the masks at the Department of Health, they sure are pushing them as hard as they possibly can on the school committees and pressuring them, putting as much indirect pressure on the school committees as they can.
Right.
And so it's
become political. It has been, and it's become a political issue from day one. And you're hearing people, at least maybe not in Rhode Island so much, but at least on a national level, you're hearing almost the admission that the political science has changed. We know that the actual science has never changed. That's probably one of the reasons why the state doesn't want to turn over its evidence it was relying upon to fight against the parents, because the actual science itself probably was never there. But the political science certainly is changing on this. And, to me, your suggestion earlier on that, let's just call it a day. The state had the opportunity, still has the opportunity, I would say, to come forward and say, listen, you know what? When this first came out, we were all kind of scrambling to figure out what the right thing to do was. We didn't make all the right decisions. People were hurt by this. People were, harmed, not only in the masking situation, but perhaps in some of the vaccine mandates as well. I mean, there was certainly harm. People lost their jobs and livelihoods, and not to mention the harm that the children have endured throughout this masking process. But the state could come out and say that. And if I were the attorney general, and just so you know, I might be running for attorney general in 2022, now that I found out it's an election year. It's one of the things that I'd probably be thinking about pretty strongly, because people appreciate honesty. Even if you're wrong, you took a position. Okay, I can understand that. That's part of your role as the attorney general, is to, when people sue the government, your role is generally to defend them. It's not always the case, though. You don't always, and it's not required, particularly in Rhode Island, where the attorney general is an independent constitutional office, which does not is not the governor's personal attorney. It's not the government's personal attorney. The attorney general has an independent responsibility to evaluate claims that are made against government officials and the government to determine whether or not there's a valid defense, or and whether or not these rules, regulations, and even statutes comport with the Rhode Island and federal constitution. And if the attorney general cannot satisfy himself in a way that he can explain to the public, then he's got an obligation, in my opinion, not to go forward and defend these things, because his job is to be not only the government's attorney, it's his job to be the people's attorney as well. And he has miserably failed on that, on all accounts, throughout this entire COVID mess.
And so if you're the attorney general and your client describes his actions back in August as doing an end around the General Assembly, should you have taken that case on?
To be, when you have public statements like that, at that point, there's an ethical dilemma.
Yeah.
There's an ethical dilemma, because you have, all right, so I, as the attorney general, as a trained attorney, can make arguments, legal arguments for you, but it's being undercut by very public statements of the people who are ostensibly making these decisions behind the scenes. They're saying, oh, well, we're just kind of like trying to do an end run around the General Assembly. But, here's all the science we're going to use to justify why we're doing that. So, forget what I said, just go out there and defend me. There's an ethical obligation on the part of any attorney, not just the attorney general, but any attorney, not to advance arguments or legal theories that they know may not be truthful. You are not there to perpetuate a fraud upon the court. Are they perpetuating a fraud upon the court? I'm going to say that they're walking that dangerous line.
Without question. And like I said, the opening gamut was, we're doing an end around the General Assembly. It has not gotten better as we saw McDonald on the stand and the case, the studies that they had put forth to, initially support their decision to put masks on the kids. So, but I go back to that initial moment when you decided as attorney general that, yeah, we're going to take this case up because it's legally sound. You knew what the governor said before you made your decision. You had the benefit of that knowledge and you did it anyway. Mm-hmm. And I'm paying for that as a taxpayer, right? I had the unique opportunity to be on the stand and look at both tables facing, both tables of attorneys facing me, and know that I was paying both of them. Both of those tables, were being paid for by me and everybody else in this suit. So I think he made an atrocious mistake there. I also seem to remember Representative
I hope you
Pat Morgan asking for an opinion prior to this all kicking off. And I think that was actually probably right before we were talking about the suit, but we may not have filed yet. And he, fluffed her off. He's like, oh, I'm really busy. Oh. And so and the attorney general's response is so much like Rido's, the way Rido treated the decision to mask kids, and the governor kind of shrugging his shoulders. Nobody really thought about any of this or consequences, or gave it the least bit of due diligence or consideration. They just did it. The Rido, of course, is guilty of putting masks on kids without any kind of cost benefit analysis being done. You'll never see one, because now we know kind of how the mask thing worked out and what benefit it provided. None. But the attorney general is the same thing. Oh yeah, we're just going to do it because we're the government and that's what we do.
I find it particularly galling that the initial response when Pat Morgan asked for an opinion was, well, I'm kind of busy. I really don't have time for this, because that's kind of been his mantra, not just in this issue, but we've heard him say that several times in public now. He's like, I don't have time for this. It's just political noise. I'm not going to respond to all that kind of thing. As the typical condescension we've heard from Peter Nerona over and over and over again, unless it's an issue that he particularly has fondness for political reasons. And that is to be that dismissive of an issue that there are so many people that have strong feelings about this, and an issue that has just real life consequences for so many people is just antithetical to the mission of that office. And especially having that foresight that you talked about of knowing what the goal was of the governor and of the Department of Health to do the end run around the General Assembly. That to me is an unforgivable sin for the chief law enforcement officer of the state of Rhode Island.
And an elected official to boot.
Yeah.
So,
100%.
this case was never taken seriously. The concerns were never taken seriously. In my view, based on what we saw in those hearings, based on what we're seeing at the local school committee level, where that 400 group is now fanned out into groups of 10, 20, 50, 100, however many more are in those school districts, getting these things removed. At the district level, that was a horrible miscalculation by the governor, by the attorney general, by the General Assembly to not respond and not intervene, not reconvene after a finding of irreparable harm. You think that's going to be forgotten in November? I'm not so sure. And I think
I'm not so sure either. I think that was a dereliction of duty from the General Assembly to not get involved sooner. And I know we all know why they didn't. They don't want the political liability.
Well, they failed to measure the political assets and liabilities on that one correctly. I think we'll see what happens in November. We'll see what happens in the spring and summer if primary challengers come forward in some of these districts, because they're not all progressive mask fanatics. A lot of them were just asleep at the switch. They weren't paying attention. Some of the things that came out on that House floor when the debate was going on, the just lack of knowledge about, one of them, and you might have seen some of my handiwork with, video editing, but there's, there were a couple of them where we're just completely uninformed about quarantine rules and how all of this stuff worked. It was, they may have been older and not had kids in the system anymore. So, they were in a different stage of life, but nobody asked any questions. And I get it that you're a part-time legislator, but I know you were getting a lot of email because I know I was sending a lot of email and I wasn't the only one doing it. Just ignored it. And I hope that candidates come forward in primary season. I hope the candidates come forward in the general election. There are seats. Rep Baginski, who I caught putting her mask back on when she seemed to have realized that she was on camera behind Filippi. That video is out there circulating around. She ran unopposed in the last election. She had a primary challenger. Something went on there. I couldn't figure out what it was, but primary challenger was disqualified. So she ended up, she made it to November. She ran unopposed and she only got 96% of the vote. So 4% of her district wrote in somebody else or didn't vote for her, which I found, and not an isolated instance either. Charlene Lima has a similar issue. She was,
the deputy speaker.
Mass incarceration.
God, my ears.
That just went right up my spine. But she's another one that ran unopposed. I mean, I'm going to let out a dirty secret for some of these General Assembly seats. There's only about, depending on the district, there's anywhere from 25 to 3,500 votes cast. Mm-hmm. These people are getting 96% of them because they're running unopposed. You split that in half, you win. Mm-hmm. You only need to get about 1,800 people to vote for you.
That's absolutely right.
It's not hard math. Like when you start, and I guarantee you, they're aware of that.
They certainly are. They certainly
and they don't want you to know that, but you and I to know that. But you split that vote. They're done.
You have no idea. You need candidates to be there to have an alternative voice, and force them to take hard positions, force them to take those hard votes. I found especially galling the deputy speaker's attempt to co-opt the parents movement, and I think you might have found it just as galling.
Get off my bandwagon.
Yeah, exactly. Get off my bandwagon. trying to make it sound like she's all on board with, all the harms that you guys have raised. And then, oh, wait a minute, I'm just going to vote to extend the governor's emergency authority. But, we got to stop the mass incarceration. And then has the gall when someone like me, I just made a comment, saying, a comment on Twitter about it as it was being broadcast that she was voting for the governor's emergency power after she makes that long and I would say less than sincere speech about, essentially being on your side, but we got to extend the governor's power. When I called her out that her actions speak louder than words, she has the gall to insult me. I'm a nobody. I'm just running for attorney general. You're the deputy speaker. You have a record to run on. So, I found that one to be particularly, I'll leave it at that. Particularly low.
Yeah, I want to dig into this a little bit because it was a fascinating week, and maybe it's instructive. I know a lot of parents, like I said, there's a couple people that you see us on local live streams like this one a lot, but there's a lot of other parents involved locally at the school committee level doing this stuff, and we wouldn't be where we are without that as well. And they don't get nearly enough credit, but they are organized and they are diligent. And if I were sitting on a school committee, or if I was in a questionable General Assembly seat, I'd be a little bit nervous come November because you're not really, these people are capable of a lot and you got to worry about what they're going to do and whether they're going to come after you or not. But the way that went out, we had the very big showing at the hearings, and we were hearing, from people, General Assembly reps that, I talk to every so often, there were a lot of people that did not want to take that vote before the hearing. The 400 people showed up, and then that made it significantly worse for them because there was zero support for continuing the masks. So obviously a deal was cut, and the deal was, we were going to shorten up mask incarceration, and but we were going to give the governor what he felt like he needed to, kind of exit and unwind, the mess that had been made over the last 2 years because nobody actually passed any laws. But she got stuck as the deputy speaker selling that. And she did a woeful job of selling it. I don't want to.
One of the worst I've ever seen.
But just to put it in context, her job, Shikarchi sent her out there and said, look, you got to go sell this thing, right? So we're going to give the governor what he wants, but we're going to end, I don't know who came up with mass incarceration, but that person needs to go find something else to do, go find their life's work, because it's not that. But she got, she had to go out there and sell it, right? So she's, I'm voting for the governor's extension because, we're ending mass incarceration, and, we're going to get all this information from the Department of Health about how this happened. And, it was a huge, surprise to her that these 3 kids didn't actually die, from COVID, right? They passed from other causes, but happened to be COVID positive when they passed. And, that's what kind of got me, because I was like, gee, that's funny, because I was in the courtroom. And so is Pat Ford. And I know there might be video about, that cross-examination circulating. May have even gotten on some talk radio, from time to time as it was unwinding.
That's right.
And some people in your district may have even sent it to you, but you were shocked and appalled nonetheless.
Of course.
So, we're in a new era now. Like, people have found Capitol TV. People are watching, they are listening. They have seen just how bad it gets if you don't pay attention, and what is allowed to happen and what is allowed to pass for normal. I don't think there's an appetite to continue it. I hope there's not an appetite to continue it.
You have to hope that after shining a light on the underbelly of state government, how deals are cut and how these things happen, that the appetite, if there was an appetite for it, it has completely evaporated, and the state wants to go on a government diet, a government-free diet, I should say, for at least a little while. See how it works out, because I can assure you that for the past 80 some odd years, it hasn't worked out very well for the majority of Rhode Islanders under a one-party rule. And I would say the same thing if it was, a different party that's been under, holding a state, uh, all the levers of power for a state for 80 some odd years, and they've been having problems. Time to change it up. I'm not a fan of one party rule on every single area of government, because there's really no one who has an effective check and balance. And even though there's availability to have that, there's plenty of availability to be that check and balance. Even if you're of the same party, the attorney general is just the one that comes to my mind, is because that's where I'm heading for, is because he doesn't work for anybody. He's his own entity. He has the ability through the legal process to say, no, not only am I not going to defend this, I'm going to get on the side of the people and say, you need to stop this, because I have independently evaluated this and I don't find it to be available.
And by the way, like I keep saying, he's an elected official. Like, you answer to us. You're not working for the governor. You weren't appointed by the governor.
No.
Department of Health, slightly different story. That's an appointed position, but you have to go campaign. And, I mean, no disrespect to the position or the legal profession, but attorney general historically has not been one that I've paid as much attention to. Suddenly, like a lot of things, I'm awake and aware of what the importance of that, that office is. And I'm paying much closer attention now. I think a lot of people are. So it's going to be interesting. Like, that's not a slam dunk anymore. The Democratic candidate for attorney general may not be an automatic anymore, because it was something we just kind of took for granted, and it happened, and there was just tremendous inertia in this state. But now you have something to answer for,
and as there should be, because the attorney general shouldn't be making political decisions. I mean, he's got to be elected, but at the same time, the attorney general is accountable to the people. And he should not automatically be coming down on one side simply because of his or her political affiliation. And I think that's where we've really lost it, because you're right. Most people don't even know what the attorney general does in this state. And the two most common questions I get when I'm telling people what I'm doing is, number one, who's the attorney general? And number two, what does he do? Like, what is it? What is it, the role of that office? Those are the most common questions. And I'm not even saying that to be snarky. Most people don't even know who the attorney general is unless they've come across that office for one reason or another, which is usually not a good thing if you're on the other side of that office. But I think people are waking up. They're seeing just how important it is for the person who enforces the law to be someone who is going to do it in a fair, equitable, and judicial manner. And same, I tell people all the time, you're going to have all the press and the stories are going to be focused on who's going to be the governor, who's going to win the congressional district 2. Sure, congressional district 2 is going to be an important race, but really in Rhode Island, the governor's race, as fun as it is to report on, the governor doesn't have really the power to do a lot of the things that most other states have. It's really, in this state, the Speaker of the House, the Secretary of State, and the Attorney General have the ability to shape and basically run this state. So, I mean, I hope people are paying attention to that.
Yeah, and I think suddenly now we're aware of these offices and what they can and can't do, and how these things happen, right? So attorney general is now much more prominent, and for all the wrong reasons, quite frankly, with a pretty significant segment of the electorate, right? That would be families of school-age children, which far outnumber the number of teachers in the state. So everybody's got to buddy up with the teachers union. I did some back of the envelope math one time. There's probably 10 votes, 10 parent votes, grandparent votes for every teacher vote in this state. But the teachers have a union, and the teachers have the ability to put a well-funded candidate anywhere they want to, anytime they want to, and they can stand one up. And so that's why that has to happen. But on a vote basis, it doesn't. They're not nearly as important as you would think. But yeah, so we're now aware of the Attorney General office. RIDO and how RIDO gets staffed has to get more attention in the future. That was a department, they inspected restaurants, they, told you to like get your flu shot a couple times a year, and, it's gonna be a good flu season, a bad flu season, and, get some exercise and make sure you eat a low fat diet, right? And that's pretty much what they did.
Yep.
Now, all of a sudden, they're putting masks on kids, they're mandating vaccines, things that, quite frankly, are just, in the way that they were being done, are well beyond public health, right? It's health that affects the public. I get that, but in a way that they're doing public health in a way that's never been done before, and we've never had something like COVID before, to be honest. But I'm not sure that a master's in public health necessarily automatically equips you to do that work.
I think that was clear.
Yeah, well, yeah, it sure was. But how that, the oversight or lack of oversight of that department throughout this pandemic is something that has to be addressed, and the General Assembly needs to answer to that.
Sure. I mean,
because they were asleep at the switch, following the science, trusting the experts. Like, no, we're going to need better than that out of you guys.
Yeah, they essentially allowed the director of the Department of Health to be the de facto governor of the state, because the governor, yeah, sure, all right, here's an emergency, but you, director of Department of Health, you are hereby, appointed, or I should say, probably maybe anointed to be the person in charge. You get to make all the regulations, do whatever you need to do to take care of this. And Governor, I mean, I almost called her Governor Nicole Alexander Scott, but Dr. Nicole Alexander Scott certainly took advantage of that during the pandemic. And there was, and I think it showed in her departure. I think it showed that there was some, I don't know if it was a split of opinion, but certainly I think it was pretty clear that Governor McKee felt that at some point that she may have been a political liability with her overzealous, I'll call it, overseeing of that department. So, that does have to be answered. That ability for an unelected bureaucrat to have wield that kind of power and having no oversight
for 2 years.
Yeah, for 2 years, of having no oversight essentially from the governor and having no oversight from the General Assembly. The courts basically wanted to stay out of it. The Attorney General was there as your muscle to back you up. How did that happen? How can we make sure that never happens again? You got to elect different people, because now it's been exposed as a political issue. It's been exposed as one where one side wants it, the other side it was, I think, at first willing to listen at least to what we had to say, because as you said, we've never really experienced anything like COVID before, and in the early stages we really didn't know what we were dealing with. So I don't think there was one side at the beginning that said absolutely under no circumstances will we agree to anything. But I think as it became more clear what we were dealing with, you had one side who was saying, all right, well, you want to do all these things to us, show us some evidence that justifies it. You're still saying that. This lawsuit is still asking for that, and they still haven't shown it. And if anything, the CDC has finally come out and said, oops, we really weren't on target with everything we were telling you.
Yeah, and one of the many failures in this process, and it happened the night of the hearing. Again, Department of Health sends not Dr. Jim McDonald, they send whoever their PR flack was, right? Good enough guy, but you're not the head of the Department of Health, and this is kind of an important issue. And by the way, there's 400 people here, so maybe you want to put your best foot forward. Just a thought. But McDonald did write a letter in support of the continued masking of children, and he cited, he provided evidence. This is the kind of slipshod stuff that's been going on for 2 years. He cites as evidence the Arizona study. And for those who may not remember the Arizona study, it's one that came out from the CDC. So of course it was 100% accurate and
Of
true,
course.
right before the start of school. And the headline was 2.5 times the incidence rate of COVID in schools that did not have mask mandates. And then an independent journalist at the Atlantic did an analysis of that study, went and pulled the same data, started finding things like some of the schools in the study were 100% virtual, online trading academies, right? So we can't possibly have a mask mandate then. But really did a nice job of dissecting all of the errors in there, ran it through other people. And, the conclusion was the same. A headline as jarring as 2.5 times the incidence should have raised suspicions among the people who prepared the study to make sure, did we do this right? But that wasn't the purpose to do it right. The purpose was to have a shocking headline, and that's what they got. But McDonald, a year into this, is still citing that as his key reason. The one piece of evidence, the best one he could find, was the Arizona study. Rest of the country knows the jig is up on the Arizona study, but McDonald is still using it as his justification, which may be why he didn't show up for the hearing himself. Don't know. But that's the kind, and then you've got a General Assembly that had no idea about this. I had to bring it to a couple people's attention. And so it did come up in the hearing. But that's another example of the kinds of breakdowns. And frankly, Rido playing very fast and very loose with the facts and hiding behind, well, we're the experts, we're the medical professionals, we are the science.
Yeah, don't question us.
Yeah, we just, as the people bearing the brunt of this, the public, business owners, healthcare workers, parents of students, in K through 12 in public schools, we cannot have a General Assembly that's that intellectually disengaged. They've got to be asking more questions. They've got to be responding to things that are coming to them from the constituents. They've got to ask more questions, and they've got to demand better answers, and they've got to question the answers that they're getting.
Well, they absolutely do. And I can't even get over how inexcusable it is and was for them not to be as engaged as they should have been throughout the entire process. I mean, they're feigning, in my opinion, they are feigning their interest in it now simply to save their behinds for this coming election season. And just like they are on a national level, doing the very same thing when the whole story is starting to unravel.
Yeah, so this is amazing to me. They're running for re-election, and they're running their best hope of getting reelected in their minds, if you use their logic, is I'm going to get reelected by keeping you less safe. So I'm not going to mandate this, I'm not going to mandate that. So you're going to be less safe, because that's why I was doing those mandates in the first place. But I feel like keeping you less safe gives me the best chance of getting reelected.
It's because political decisions should be, the all knowing and all encompassing there.
Yeah. It's just a very
twisted
strange
logic.
Twisted logic. Yes.
The twisted logic is so twisted that I'm having a hard time wrapping my brain around it. And, my job as a lawyer sometimes is to twist logic as far as you can possibly take it. But even I can't twist logic that much.
Yeah. Well, to do it like that requires that the people you're dealing with have a very short memory, so that they don't remember the 3 things you told them, a month ago.
And that really brings us back to where we started here, is that they want this lawsuit, the one you're involved in, out of the public's mind as soon as possible, because they're counting on people forgetting or putting it out of the forefront of their mind, because they need it to be out of the forefront of their mind in order to survive this election. So instead of answering your discovery, instead of being transparent, as the Attorney General told everyone he was going to be when he came into office, instead of being transparent, as the governor, told us when he was elevated to that position he was going to be, they are just simply trying to push this off to the forefront, hoping that people have forgotten come November 8th. I really don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, the sense you get from the General Assembly and the way they put this deal together that they sent Rep Lima out to sell, is, oh, hey, look, we're taking the masks off the kids, so we're good, right? Everything's cool, right? No,
No
we're
foul,
not
no
good.
harm, no foul.
Yeah, no, we're not good. Everything's not cool. Sorry.
It's like
Still gonna remember this in November. Sorry, guys, too
yeah,
late, way too late.
you took 2 years of our lives,
Yeah,
and my kids, in your kids' lives, and healthcare workers' lives. You've taken
yeah.
some people's livelihoods. It's not all good just because you have now given us. Oh, thank you, Master, for giving us back our freedoms. It's not good. It's unaccountable. It's shockingly bad.
Yeah, and one other thing, I know we're here to kind of talk about the parents in the lawsuit, but the healthcare workers that they sat by, let's remember, let's take a little walk down, because I know like people have short memory. In January of 2021, you still had healthcare workers, there was no vaccine, yet healthcare workers going to work day in, day out, still a lot of unknowns about COVID. But not a lot of PPE, right? So they're still struggling to get the PPE, but they're going to work, they're doing what they need to do, they're treating people. Meanwhile, the General Assembly goes back to work begrudgingly in their $166,000 plexiglass COVID castle to keep them safe, right? And then when it comes time to stick up for the healthcare workers, when the vaccine mandate came through, they didn't know them. They forgot those COVID heroes.
Who are
What
you?
COVID heroes? Who are
Yeah,
those
who?
guys?
Yeah.
And stay out of my plexiglass cubicle. I mean, the cajones on these people is absolutely shocking to me. And if for those who watch this, I know we're a little bit late in the thing. Pass the link to this show on to a friend. If they're not part of the coalition, have them subscribe, but get more people involved in this. And my God, if you've ever considered running for General Assembly, this is the year, because there is such an anti-incumbent mood after everything that they've done and what they've not done over the last 2 years, and the number of people that they have sold down the river, whether it was business owners, whether it was parents and kids, whether it was healthcare workers. They've stood idly by through it all and shrugged their shoulders. And this is the time to run. And simply, we cannot have empty seats, on the other side of the ticket, and having people running unopposed. These people they have not earned the right to run unopposed. And they certainly are not running unopposed because they're such a great candidate and such an effective legislator that, that they're the only obvious choice. They're the obvious only choice.
Right.
So I hope people find a way to become a candidate. And if you're not a candidate, go work for a candidate, walk with them, carry their water, whatever. But that's the only way that this is gonna turn around, because if we all go back to our normal lives and master up the kids, hooray, and the vaccine thing seems to be waning a little bit, we're going to be right back in the soup less than a year from now, and it'll be something else. But leaving these people at the controls any longer than is absolutely necessary, and right now that has to be November, is a huge mistake on all of our parts. So we got to start cleaning this up.
Couldn't agree more, Rich. I think that you put it perfectly. If there's ever a time to have an opposing viewpoint running against these incumbents who supported these mandates that put people out of work, put people out of their homes, put these masks on kids for this period of time, that stood up for nobody but themselves, who were in there to be true politicians instead of public servants. This is the time to make them say, oops, we really screwed this one up. We really, it's time to make them remember how bad of a job they did.
And
And
you forgot who you worked for.
exactly, you forgot who you worked for, forgot who you represent. You thought you were smarter, you thought you were better, you thought you were more important than those that you represent. And that's just simply unacceptable. It's unacceptable for any politician to do that. It's unacceptable particularly for General Assembly representatives, senators, state and House representatives who are there to be the voice of the electorate. And it was certainly unacceptable to have our governors, both Raimondo and McKee, basically doing what they did, which was being an unaccountable head of their state, even though they really weren't displaying any leadership skills whatsoever. And I will just add this, it was unbelievably unacceptable for the Attorney General to be their muscle and back them all up in the process of doing all of this. So I couldn't agree with you more.
And it hasn't just been, yeah, and the Attorney General hasn't just been the parents' case, right?
No.
The Attorney General's been involved in all of these as the muscle.
He is.
So it wasn't like he just made one bad choice in one in one case that he shouldn't have taken. He's been the muscle on all of this.
He has, and he's in federal court doing the same thing with the healthcare workers, defending the state on that. He's been the one, if you go to, if you've gone through the Department of Health administrative proceedings and you make it all the way up to an appellate level that goes to court, the Attorney General comes in and takes over those cases most of the time. He doesn't have to. Again, the Department of Health and the Department of Administration have plenty of attorneys. And I don't know why any of those attorneys can't go to court and defend the decisions of their department, but the Attorney General seems to have taken a particular interest in making sure that these policies were enforced and that those who oppose them ultimately would have to pay a lot of money for a lawyer and potentially face some serious liability if they were on the wrong side of this. So I hope people don't forget that, because that's a part that's talked about not as much as the General Assembly's dereliction, but just as important.
Yeah, the current AG is an enabler, and he's 100% on board and part of this. So he's on the list that needs to be held accountable. And I wish you the best, and anything I can do to help, please let me know.
I appreciate that. And I intend to hold him accountable for his actions and inactions throughout this entire 3+ years we've had to deal with this administration, which has been nothing but a partisan administration, when he should be a law enforcement officer doing what's best for the people of the state of Rhode Island. It hasn't happened. It will happen if I get elected to be Attorney General. So on that note, Rich, I really do want to thank you for shedding some light onto the recent updates on your case, talking about some of the issues that have been going on with these mandates, the harm that's been suffered by your children, through all the people who've had to suffer through these mandates and everything that's going along with that, the collateral consequences of being forced to comply with all of this. And I want to thank you and the people on your team, the plaintiffs, that had the guts to come forward and challenge this, and try to hold our governor, our Department of Health, and Attorney General and General Assembly, for that matter, accountable to the people of the state of Rhode Island. And without groups like you, we would not have the information that we have right now to arm ourselves going forward to be a more informed electorate and to hold our elected officials accountable.
Well, we were all very happy to do it. And like I said, once you start messing with the kids, then you've got a whole different fight on your hands. And like I said, we've been working at this since August. Greg Picciarelli, Dr. Andrew Bostom, all the parents. We would not be where we are right now, and it took a really long time. But the masks are going to come off on Monday in just about every school district in the state. We've got a couple that are still pending. Providence doesn't look like they're going to go that way, but there is a very large, very well organized, and we get better at this every day. And that should concern anybody that's on the wrong side of these issues.
Well, that's good to know, because it's going to take everything that you guys have to make sure that these individuals are held accountable. These professional politicians are held accountable for what they've done and put everyone through here in the state of Rhode Island these last 2 years. So we're going to end the show. We're coming to the end of the show right now. Just want to remind everybody that We're here at Chaz Calenda, Attorney at Law, which is on the Coalition Radio Network, Wednesday nights around 8:30, where we have guests like Rick Southwell and others who have been involved in significant legal issues here throughout the state of Rhode Island. And I appreciate once again, Rich, your perspective and everything that you shared with us here tonight. And I hope you'll come back on another episode of Chaz Calenda, Attorney at Law, where we can discuss the future happenings of your case and cases of similar nature that go forward as we go along. So once again, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Very happy to be here anytime. Thanks, Chaz.
And again, I'm Chaz Calenda. I'm an attorney at the law firm of Inman and Torgey in Coventry, Rhode Island, 1500 Nooseneck Hill Road in Coventry, 401-823-9200. I'm also an announced candidate for the Rhode Island Attorney General's office in the 2022 election, November 8th. You can find out information about me and where I stand on those issues at the website CHAS, C-H-A-S, the number 4, AG.com. And you can link to all my social media accounts and every press statement, every release, and all the issues that I feel strongly about and my vision for the future of the Office of the Attorney General there. Thank you once again for all of you watching on the Coalition Radio Network. It's been another exciting and fun Wednesday evening, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Chaz Calenda, Attorney at Law. Thank you and have a good night.